Hello. Somebody had this idea that I could just sign my name over and over again while people watched. And I was like, that seems like a good idea. Or also if nobody watches, that's also okay. But I'm gonna sign my name over and over again. Today I'm using at the moment I'm using a light blue pen, which I'm pretty excited about. And this is what I did earlier, before now. I can't see your comments, so don't invest in super chats. It's my number one piece of recommendation for you. Also over here I have, somebody gave me a speeding cube, Rubik's Cube. And sometimes, because my hand hurts, I've been doing this for 9 years. Signed my name over 500,000 times in the last 9 years. I mean, obviously, I also signed my name some before that, but as a sustained practice, 9 years. And I had physical therapy in the very beginning of this because my shoulder hurt all the time and my elbow really hurt, and I was kind of getting carpal tunnel syndrome, some numbness in my fingers. So back in 2011, when I was signing the first printing of The Fault in Our Stars, I had some physical therapy, which was extremely helpful and kind of taught me how to sign my name in a sustainable way. But now, of course, I'm significantly older than I was then. And so my hand does start to hurt sometimes. So I've read that doing things like the Rubik's Cube or other sort of relaxing things that change the shape of your hand a little bit can be helpful. So that's why that's there. What else is in the frame? Oh, my really disorganized bar area in the background, which I apologize for. The doors to this room, which are closed, and part of the very edge of the Vlogbrothers set, I guess. This is, the Vlogbrothers set. It's not just the set; it's also my basement. Oh, and there's an Anmile photograph. I'm getting a phone call, but it's a spam call, so I'm just gonna decline that. Anmile is a photographer, a brilliant photographer. In this particular series, she photographs Vietnam War reenactors, or moments from Vietnam War reenactments in the United States. Is that it? I think that's all that's in the background. So there's nothing else to tell you about, except that little sky blue painting. Photograph. I don't know if that's a photograph or a painting, and also, to be honest, I don't know what it is. I think Sarah used it for the art assignment set back when the art assignment set was also here in this very basement. So maybe that's what it is. But yeah, I'm just going to sign my name. I think I'm going to stop talking and just sign my name, but then maybe I'll start talking again in a little while. It's like ASMR for you and for me. So let's just make this a productivity live stream, and you just do your stuff in the background. I'll do my stuff. Yeah, so for those who don't know, I am signing copies. I'm signing these sheets of paper that will be bound into copies of my new book, which is coming out next May. It's my first book of nonfiction, and also, I guess, my first book for grown-ups, although I don't really see that distinction as being particularly important, at least to me, but obviously it's very different because it's a book of nonfiction. It's based on my podcast, The Anthropocene Reviewed, in which I review facets of the human-centered planet on a 5-star scale, like the Taco Bell breakfast menu, and cholera, and the Nathan's Famous Hot Dog Eating Contest, and viral meningitis. There's a lot about disease and a lot about sports. It's sort of, I guess, not that much about sports, but it is, I guess, more than anything, an essay about my preoccupations, which is one of my favorite words. Isn't that a great word? Preoccupation. It's very good. That's an excellent use of prefix, in my opinion. What else might you be wondering? You might be wondering why I'm wearing a jacket in our house. We keep it cold because it doesn't make sense to heat things to a point where you can wear shirt sleeves inside. We don't understand it. I have a sticker that says I voted, because I did. I voted quite a while ago, but I've kept the sticker just so that when I'm out and about at the pharmacy or whatever, maybe other people will be like, oh, geez, I should probably do that. And if you live in the US and you're eligible to vote, I do hope that you will or already have voted. Make a plan to vote. Talk to your friends and family members about voting. I also think it's very valuable to have tough conversations with your friends and family if you feel strongly about this election and the way that it's going to impact you or issues you care about. So I've had some of those conversations, not necessarily easy, but potentially very valuable. It occurs to me that it's also possible that you can't hear me, which is okay. Sometimes I add a little spiral, partly because I think it might make people happy, and partly to ask my hand to do something else from the thing that it does over and over again. These have actually all been pretty good signatures so far, so maybe performing for the camera is improving the quality of my signatures. I don't know, but I've been pleased with these. I had a bad morning. I had a morning of many things, many signatures not going the way that I wanted them to. You can kind of see behind me the stack that I have left for the day. So I am doing one box today. There's about, each box contains about 3,000 sheets, and that takes about 6 hours if you count all the stacking and various things that you've got to do to actually get the stuff signed. And that's a good amount. Like, I'd like to be in a situation where I don't have to sign more than 3,000 in a day, because I can. You know, I've signed up to like, I don't know, 7,000 or 8,000 in a day, but it's just more stressful, and my fingers start to hurt a lot more, and it's just not as fun. So this is the right pace, the pace that can be sustained. I've done about 52,000 so far, and I have 150,000. I may end up with more depending on how many people pre-order the book. I've been really thrilled with how many people have pre-ordered it, and I'm really grateful and excited, and only a little nervous. But also, I should say, obviously, I can't control where you pre-order your books, but if you do call your local independent bookstore up, or local bookstore, they really need your support right now, and it can really help. So consider that, not just if you're pre-ordering this book, but if you're ordering any book. In Life's Library, if you're not a member of Life's Library, I really recommend reading this book that we just read. It was picked, we had a guest curator this time, Celeste Ng, who wrote Little Fires Everywhere. And she chose as her book a book by Eula Biss called On Immunity, that is about the relationship between humans and vaccines, and why that relationship is complex. And it's a really beautiful, empathetic book that is also wonderfully, richly researched. It's one of my favorite books that we've read in Life's Library. I just was completely, I mean, admittedly, it's sort of my jam. Essays about, discursively written essays about health are right in my wheelhouse of what I love to read and write. So, but it is extraordinary, truly. It's a real, just an incredible accomplishment, and especially since we're living now in a time of, a time that is so much defined by infectious disease, and we are all waiting on a vaccine or a series of vaccines that will be, we are not yet sure how effective. And so it's a really good book to read right now. Speaking of which, in a moment, I have to look at I limit my ingestion of coronavirus news to one brief period at noon every day, which is when the Indiana State Department of Health updates their daily statistics. So I'm going to check that and also just make sure that the live stream is working in a minute here. And then I think if it's working okay and you can hear me, then I'm just going to go full just focus on signing for a while. But I'm going to do 10 more real quick. So yeah, let me know if you can hear me and anything else that is a pressing concern. And I'll check in a second. Oh, that was not very good at all, but I'm going to try to make it better by adding a spiral. This also isn't going to win any awards. Now it's coming back. There we go. All right, that last one was good. See, this one is good. That to me, it's good. It covers a fair amount of the page. It's a little too low, so you can actually see that it's a little like lower than the middle. But in the scheme of things, of the things I can do wrong, that is not the worst one. Okay. So I stack. I'm going to stack them up. You can't see the place where I'm stacking them, but there's about like 1,000 down there, and then eventually, when I've done those, it will be 3,000, and then I'll have a feeling of accomplishment today that I did something that didn't matter very much, but maybe mattered a little. Okay, Joe, thank you for the super chat, but again, I'll donate the super chat money, but don't waste your money on super chats. I want to know why you replaced Diet Dr. Pepper with Mountain Dew. What is happening? I know, Austin, that I shouldn't read the ones that are in capital letters, because that just tells people to make more capital letters. But then I also always just read the ones with capital letters because they're so much easier to read, and then we perpetuate a bad system. This is not your fault, Austin, or anyone else's fault. It's just, it's not a good system. All right, time to have the daily dose of horror and worry. Waiting for a dashboard to load. The in.gov website is not the fastest website in the world. Okay. I am going to answer some questions, including the question about Diet Mountain Dew. And then I'm going to, well, come on. How long does it take the dashboard to update? Come on, y'all. You can do it. You can do it. I can live stream, but I can't download a website, I guess. I'm going to, all right. Okay. Okay. So whatever, this website isn't loading, and is this information going to make me feel better anyway? No. I already answered why I'm wearing a jacket. I'm wearing a jacket because we keep the house cold inside, because why wouldn't we? Because it's not an inconvenience to wear a jacket inside. Okay. I'm just going to stop. I'm going to stop looking. Okay. So many of you are asking questions about the pages that I'm signing. I will answer those questions, and then I will also discuss the Diet Mountain Dew situation. I mean, this isn't a perfectly framed, it isn't perfectly framed, but that's okay. We're not trying to make Citizen Kane here. We're just trying to sign sheets of paper. I'm going to add to the stack a little bit because I like the stack at a certain height becomes a little hard for my shoulder. Okay. So let's begin with the Diet Mountain Dew question. Austin, there is a national shortage of Diet Dr. Pepper. Now, I realize that this is not the biggest problem that the world is facing right now. In fact, it may be the smallest problem that the world is facing right now. But for those of us who really, really love Diet Dr. Pepper and view being a Dr. Pepper fan as part of our identity, the shortage of Diet Dr. Pepper is a real issue, because I drink 2 Diet Dr. Peppers a day. Those 2 Diet Dr. Peppers make me incredibly happy. They are a constant, reliable source of joy in my life. And now there is a Diet Dr. Pepper shortage. Dr. Pepper has had to release like a statement about the Dr. Pepper shortage. Basically, here's what it boils down to. I don't know how much you know about the world of soda, but Dr. Pepper is much smaller than Coke or Pepsi. Like, unlike almost every popular flavor soda, Mountain Dew, Sprite, Mr. Pibb, etc., Dr. Pepper is not owned by one of the 2 sugary water giant corporations, Coke and Pepsi. Dr. Pepper is an independent company. It is called the Dr. Pepper Snapple Group. And as such, they have less negotiating power when it comes to negotiating the purchase of aluminum can blanks. And they don't have the same manufacturing structure that Coke and Pepsi have. This has caused a shortage of cans, which in turn has caused a shortage of Diet Dr. Pepper. So now I drink 1 Diet Dr. Pepper per day and either 1 or 2 Diet Mountain Dews. Now, do I like Diet Mountain Dew? I don't know. It's fine. Mostly to me, it tastes like the pandemic because I didn't drink it before the pandemic and I don't intend to drink it after it's over. But it's fine. It's okay. It has caffeine, but like less than you find in coffee, which I appreciate. It's okay. It's pretty good. I mean, look, diet sodas are incredible in general. We should celebrate them. I mean, except for their, huge impact on the planet and not being particularly good for you. But they taste great. Anyway, right. So that answers that question. Many of you have asked what I am doing. I'm signing my name over and over again. I have a new book coming out next May. It's a book of essays. It's called The Anthropocene Reviewed. It's based on my podcast, which is also called The Anthropocene Reviewed. I say my podcast. That's very pleased with myself. Like, it's not my podcast. It's a podcast made in collaboration with lots of great people, including WNYC, and Stan Muller and Rosianna Halse-Rojas and Hannes Brown, who makes the music. A lot of people contribute to the Anthropocene Reviewed, but I am writing the book on my own. But again, not really on my own, because writing is also a massive collaboration. So I'm working with my editor, Julie Strauss-Gable, who's edited all of my books. And I'm working with Sarah and with Rosianna and with lots of other people who have input into what goes into the books, including like every book I read, every piece of information I encounter. Like, any kind of making stuff is a massive collaboration. Even this, not to get too deep into how everything is a collaboration, but like even this is a collaboration, right? Because who made the paper? Who sent me the paper from the Penguin Random House central warehouse in Crawfordsville, Indiana? Who made the Sharpie? Who discovered the Sharpie? Who discovered like the technology that underlines the Sharpie, etc. So all of this is contingent, like everything else that we do. So yeah, I'm signing 150,000 sheets of paper. So each of these, then this goes to Pennsylvania, where the printer is. And then each one of these sheets of paper gets bound in the process of printing and binding the book. As part of that, there's a little machine that shoots one of these pieces of paper into that book along with all the other pieces of paper, and then it gets bound in together. So this is it's known as a tip-in sheet because there's a machine that tips it in alongside all the other pieces of paper. And that is how every copy of the first printing of the US and Canadian edition of the Anthropocene Reviewed will be signed by the magic of that tip-in sheet machine. So tip-in sheets have been around for a long time, but they weren't really used at scale. So the first time I became aware of them was in 2009 when my friend David Levithan and I wrote a book together, and they requested a couple thousand signed sheets from David and I just to send to certain independent bookstores and libraries. And I was like, that's such an amazing technology. And I know, like, I've said this in a video before, but I am like keenly aware of the therapist-y, psychologist-y reason why I might be doing this, which is that when I was 10, I won a writing contest, even though the story I wrote was freaking terrible. I won a writing contest, like a fourth grade writing contest. And I got to go to this Florida Young Writers Conference, which was very exciting. It was the first time anyone had ever told me that I was like good at something school related. Anyone, my parents were always very encouraging, but it was the first time I'd like won an award for anything, and it was very exciting. And I went to this conference, and there was a writer there who in my mind was pretty famous, and I was a fan of his work. And I brought a bunch of my old sort of like dog-eared paperback copies of his books for him to sign, only to learn that he wasn't signing old books, only his new hardcover. And it was really sad for me when I was a little kid. I'd never had an autographed book. I didn't have money to get the hardcover, so it definitely left a mark. I mean, I think about that very differently now that I'm not a kid, and now that I have a career as an author, because I understand the pressure that authors are under to sell their new books and to sell hardcover books, both like external financial pressures, because that's how the publisher makes most of a lot of money. That's where the margins are in publishing, or one of the big places where margins are. And then also the internal pressure of, like in my childhood mind, this guy was super successful and therefore like probably very rich. And look, there was never a point in my career where I wouldn't have signed a paperback book, and I hope there never will be. I will be very disappointed in my future self if at some point he says he doesn't want to sign paperbacks anymore. Because I don't think it's that hard, and I think so I still think this guy should have done it. But I think about it differently now, because I don't know, maybe he had kids in college that he was trying to help get through college, or maybe he was worried about the mortgage. There's a lot of I don't know. My 9-year-old self was extremely judgmental in a way that my 43-year-old self tries not to be. Anyway, I'm aware that like that is probably part of why I sign my name over and over again, because it is nice, I think, if you can get a signed book. And like, I do think, at least for me, like it does mean something different. When I was a kid, it was the pre-selfie days. So, if you got something from someone, whose work you admired, it was an autograph. And I think I just placed, for whatever reason, I placed some value on that in my mind. And so I don't know, for me, it's like, it's a way of saying thank you. It's a little way of saying that I really appreciate, especially someone who would put enough faith in my work to buy it before they have read reviews or whatever. Like pre-ordering a book takes a certain amount of, you sort of got to make a leap of faith with the author. So it's a way of saying thank you, but also it's a way of, I don't know. I think there's a lot of people who don't live in big cities and can't go to like book signings. Like that was the situation I was in when I was a kid, certainly. And it's a way of, I don't know, just saying thank you. Also, I enjoy it. It's meditative. It is, it's a way of not thinking. It's a way of being that's just, being. So there are a lot of reasons why I do it. And the truth is, like, while I'm doing it, I don't think much about the reasons. I mostly just think about the signatures and whether they're good or bad. And I know that when other people look at my signature, which is very uncomplicated and not particularly, well, it's actually quite unbeautiful. I know that when other people look at my signatures and they see good ones and bad ones, they look identical, because like all of my signatures are bad ones in the scheme of things. But I have an idea in my mind of what it should look like, and it's pretty specific. And so mostly I'm just thinking about whether I'm achieving that goal. So yeah, these are for my book, The Anthropocene Reviewed. Every copy of the first printing will be signed. Signed copies don't cost any more than unsigned ones. The price should be the same. It is a little bit more of an expensive book because it's a book for adults, and the world of adult publishing is just the money functions quite differently. And that was a bummer for me. And but I also understand that, well, I understand for one thing, there's been some inflation in the last 15 years since my first book came out. And so I have to be realistic about that. But also, it's not really, in the end, like one of the many things that authors don't get to choose if they publish traditionally is price. And it's not that expensive in the scheme of things. I mean, I think it works out to, under $3 an hour of reading, under $2 an hour of reading, hopefully. So yeah. As for what the book is about, it's about, I guess in the largest sense, it's about trying to map some of what it meant to be alive in one little corner of the world and in one moment of time. So it's about the Taco Bell breakfast menu, and it's about the cave paintings at Lascaux, and it's about the artwork of Agnes Martin, but it's really a memoir. It's about how it felt to be me, and I guess kind of the stories that I told myself to, the stories that I still tell myself to survive and kind of figure out where I'm gonna find meaning in life. It's like when I started the project, I mean, there were two things that interested me. One was the rise of the 5-star scale in the first place. It's very weird, right, that now we rank so much on a 5-star scale, not just movies or books, but also like public restrooms and doctors' bedside demeanors and whatnot. When I started out my writing career as a reviewer for Booklist magazine, writing 175-word book reviews, and I wrote hundreds and hundreds of book reviews during the time that I worked there. And I never once rated a book on the 5-star scale because, of course, it wasn't necessary. The 175 words said much more than a single data point could. But with the rise of machine thinking, and I would argue kind of the worship of machine thinking in 21st century human life, we've begun to distill even extremely complex, multitudinous experiences into a single data point on a 5-star scale. And that interests me. Like, it interests me that we, that the 5-star scale really rose in, it really rose with machines and with the internet, especially because not that we need to communicate to each other that how complex experiences feel with a single data point, because we have lots of other ways to communicate with each other about how those complex experiences feel. Like, I have lots of ways to tell you about the bedside manner of my doctor, or about the quality of the public restroom in my local Walgreens. But when I'm trying to convey the meaning of those experiences to a computer or through the internet, the 5-star scale suddenly becomes very helpful, because it's something that machines can parse very quickly and with great specificity. So like, you end up in this hilarious situation where like I where a book will have, I think The Fault in Our Stars has over 2 million Goodreads ratings, and you end up in a situation where a book has like a 4.23618 overall score, and you're sitting there at home thinking about whether to buy the book, wondering if 4.26381 is good. Yeah. So that was like, I guess, the first thing when I started the project that really interested me. Like, what does it mean to distill these things into a single data point, and how can I play with the absurdity of that by writing these like ridiculously, stupidly in-depth Yelp reviews of the Taco Bell breakfast menu. But then the other thing that interested me, and that has interested me for a long time, is what are we going to do about the problem of meaning, about like the problem of meaning in human life, which for a long time we had these great, I mean, there were a lot of downsides. Obviously, I don't feel like I have to necessarily go too deep into the downsides of having like large scale wars over the question of whether or not the bread and wine at communion become the literal or only the figurative body and blood of God. Like, obviously, it was not good to fight wars where millions of people died over over the quality of that metaphor. But for a long time, the idea that meaning in life was supposed to be derived from a higher source of some kind was so built into the way people thought about meaning that even when people thought about science and mathematics, they still saw it as a way of deriving meaning from a greater truth, from like, even the word divine, like the verb divining contains within it this idea that you're divining truth from somewhere, from something, not that you're uncovering useful constructs, but that you are divining real objective truth from natural laws, or from natural philosophy, as it was often called in the Middle Ages. And it wasn't, and this didn't happen all at once or anything, but over the last couple hundred years, there's been these big shifts in human life that are pretty unprecedented. We've gone from a world where nobody could expect to drink, for instance, canned Diet Dr. Pepper, to a world where, around 80 to 85% of humans can at least afford to have one Diet Dr. Pepper on occasion. And by that measure, if not by others, life is better for most people than it was for the richest like kings of 200 years ago. But there are lots of other measures in which that isn't true. And I sometimes think that metaphor is overutilized, or like that it obscures some deep things about the way that poverty and structural injustice work. But anyway, that's not what I wanted to talk about. What I wanted to talk about was like this question of whether or not meaning is derived from some higher source, or whether it's like purely constructed by humans. Like, so if we say that the meaning of life is to serve God, which is like what traditionally, we might have said the meaning of life was, most people might have said the meaning of life was in Europe and the Islamic world, in the Christian world and in the Islamic world, 200 or 300 years ago. Well, now, even for religious people like myself, there is certainly, I think, a question about to what extent that idea is derived from a higher source, and to what extent it is constructed by humans. And then I think for people who aren't religious, it's also a big question, like, how is there inherent meaning to life? And if there isn't, does that mean that like life is meaningless and the correct response is a sort of nihilistic despair / like doing whatever I want to do to feel good in the moment? Or does it mean that like we have to construct meaning that will at least initially feel less real because it is constructed and we're aware of the fact that it's constructed? And if so, like how do we do that? Like, how do we make meaning in a world where we are conscious of the fact that whatever meaning we make might be constructed and might not be like, inherently, might not be true in the way that a tree, observing a tree is true, but might instead be true in the way that like observing a table is true, which is to say that when you look at a table, you know that it was made. It's real, but you know that it was made. And I think like that's a very personal thing for me, because for me, having a sense of meaning, a sense of orientation, a sense of purpose is like mission critical. It's pretty, it's pretty, yeah, it's essential for me to survival. And so I think the Anthropocene Reviewed has also been me trying to puzzle my way through that question. Is the meaning that we're going to find still meaningful? Is it still important? Is it still, the stuff of sustenance? And so that's what I've been trying to write about, but in lots of different ways. Like sometimes I write about that through the context of the frickin' Nathan's Famous Hot Dog Eating Contest. And other times I write about it through the lens of sycamore trees, which I'm just really into sycamore trees. If you've ever seen a sycamore tree, you're probably into them too. It's pretty much universal American experience. I know that there are different sycamore trees that in Europe and stuff that aren't as beloved, but boy, I don't want to brag. There's a lot that's not working about the United States, obviously, but our sycamore trees are just phenomenal. Well, I was gonna like have a quiet ASMR signing session, and then I just couldn't shut up. So that's the way this went. All right, this pen is cooked. I throw the used pens down on the ground. Is that an efficient system? No, but it makes me feel something. It makes me feel alive. It makes me feel like you're done, pen. Well, you can see this is the last one I signed with the pen. And you could just, it's still fine, but you can start to see if you look at the little bottom of the J, you can start to see that it's just not, it's not the full pen, it's just a little bit. And then I worry, and this is probably not a rational worry, but I worry that like whoever gets that signature is going to like look at their signature and they're going to be like, I feel like you should have switched pens right before that one. And they're not wrong. So I'm going to switch pens now. And then I'm going to read some comments. And then I'm going to try to get, I am going to try to get a little more quiet. Oh boy. Not as young as I used to be. I'm going to use a green pen. Oh, my hand is feeling a little tight. Okay. Green pen. Actually, Sharpie gave me these pens. This is so embarrassing. But Sharpie gave me these pens that say John Green's #1 marker. Like I sent Sharpie a direct message on Twitter like 3 or 4 years ago, and I was like, sponsor me, because they should. Like I was like, Sharpie, I give you a lot of public credit about being the best marker in the world, which you are, and I don't know if you know about how much I Oh God. Well, I mean, I kind of wish that I hadn't looked at the new COVID numbers in Indiana. Very bad. Is there a little note? Oh, no. Oh God. Even the little info note makes things worse. Okay. I mean, it's not going to do me any good to make a big deal out of that. But it is by far the worst day. But it doesn't do any good to think about it because it doesn't change what I'm doing personally. Okay. There's 3,700 new cases in the United States, in Indiana today, which is the most ever by over 1,000. And also the positivity rate is higher than it was now higher than it was at the beginning of the pandemic. So that's also very bad. Yeah. So I'm going to give you, right. So there's a couple questions that I've seen. It's a little hard to follow all the questions. But I think I have seen some of them. Okay. A lot. I don't know if it's a lot of you who want to know where I got my sofa, or just one of you asking repeatedly. But I'm happy to answer the question. It's from Restoration Hardware. I don't know if we. I mean, this sofa is so old. It's like 15 years old. But we got it re-covered so that it looks newer. It's a great sofa though. It's very deep, which is important if you're signing, because you need to be able to got to be able to move your body in certain positions. Okay. There will be an audiobook, but the audiobook will not be signed. It will be narrated by me, however. Yeah, so I think all the audiobook stuff is still getting figured out. The foreign publishing stuff is still getting figured out. So you can order the US edition from a lot of places, but some places you can't. And hopefully those places, the book will come out in translation. I would be really thrilled if the book were published in translation in the places where my other books have been published. I've been so fortunate with my so fortunate to be published by great companies around the world, and also just to have really wonderful translators who in many cases make my work better. Like my German translator Sophie Zeitz and my Dutch translator Allied, they, at least to judge from the reviews, like they do something to my books that makes them much better than they are in English. So grateful for that. But yeah, I don't know about the rest of it, but there will be an audiobook. And if you like listening to audiobooks, I think you can pre-order it now on Libro FM or wherever you get your audiobooks, but I'm not actually sure. I haven't looked. Okay, I'm just gonna sign for a while, I think, if that's okay. All right, these are not very good, so I'm gonna like try to reposition my body or something. I don't know why they're not good, but that one especially was bad. I'm gonna put a DFTBA on there to try to make it so that the person who gets it isn't like, oh God, what a hideous signature. I think by now I've answered all the major questions. So people in chat can just be like, it's his first book of essays and he's signing every copy of the first printing and he's wearing the jacket because they don't turn the heat on unless it's absolutely necessary to try to conserve energy so they feel less bad about their Diet Dr. Pepper usage. And he's sitting like that because it's the only comfortable way to sit while also being able to sign effectively. And the Rubik's Cube is for if his hand starts to hurt. And the photograph in the background is by An Millet. Oh, I didn't finish my story about Sharpie though, which was that I was like, hey, Sharpie, I'm pretty sure that I use more of your product than anyone in the world, which is probably not true, but I use it a lot. And I noticed that they were sponsoring Derek Jeter, like the New York Yankee. And I was like, come on, man. Derek Jeter isn't out all day, every day using your product. I am. And I don't know what I thought would happen. I'm sure that like in my mind, I had some dream of becoming like Sharpie's TV pitch man, which in retrospect is not a job I would have enjoyed. But instead they sent me 96 green Sharpies that say John Green's #1 marker, which is appreciated. I mean, 96 Sharpies is like, I don't know, like $60 worth of Sharpies. I'll take it. So I'm going to work my way through those. I think that I'm going to run out before I get to 150,000 because I can only do like about, I don't know. I mean, I can do 1,000 with a Sharpie, with a single Sharpie if I want to, but I feel like the last 300 never look very good. So I tend to call it at about 700. Like my brother signs much later into the Sharpie, and I actually think it looks really good with his signature. But for me, it's just the way I like to do it. So yeah. Yeah, when I told y'all that like all I think about while I'm signing is about the signature itself, I wasn't lying. Although now I'm also thinking about the massive spike in COVID hospitalizations here in Indiana, which is worrisome. And we have a couple friends who have, as I'm sure all of y'all do, who have COVID, one of whom has it pretty seriously. And yeah, I just hope that she's home from the hospital, and I just hope she's able to stay home. That's all. That's the other thing I'm thinking about. Is it getting too small? It was too small. One of the things I think about sometimes is how the previous signature can affect the next one, which is reflective of how I feel about art and our information landscapes more generally. Like, the last tweet you read affects the way that you read the next tweet that you read. The last TikTok that you saw affects the way that you feel about the next TikTok that you watch. And even though, or like the so when I was a kid, I was taught that like writing and art making in general were all about mastery and genius. So they were all about being, perfect at your craft and being a genius. And there was almost, especially with the way like visual art was talked about, a sense of like genius being handed down from one inevitably male author and inevitably white author to the next. So Picasso to Pollock to Hockney, or the Ninja Turtle Renaissance artists, and that great or interesting or important art emerged primarily from what James Joyce famously called the smithy of his soul. Now I think of art very differently. I think of it as a big collaboration in which a few people end up getting, I guess I would say, over-celebrated, because the truth is that it's a lot of people. Not just a lot of people, it's kind of everyone. So now I think about it as, and this is actually an essay in the book, I think about it as like the world's largest ball of paint in Alexandria, Indiana, which is this ball of paint that's been painted like, it's a baseball that's been painted with like 30,000, 40,000 layers of paint, so that now it's, I don't know, 12 or 15 feet in diameter, probably. It's huge. And of course, and most of those paint layers have been added by people who go and visit the world's largest ball of paint there in Alexandria, Indiana. And of course, your layer of the ball of paint doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter much in the scheme of like what the ball of paint ends up looking like. But like the color that you choose does affect the color that the next person chooses inevitably, which in turn affects the color that the next person chooses, and so on. And even though your layer of the ball of paint is utterly invisible to the world, and will always be utterly invisible, it still mattered, and it was still essential. It was absolutely essential to the ball of paint becoming what the ball of paint has become. And so like every now and again, someone will paint the ball of paint, and then a bunch of people will be like, oh my God, like what an incredible coat of paint has just been added. This is, everybody take pictures of this one. Like, let's all make sure that we reward this one. This is an incredible, what a color. And I bet it is, and it is often a good color. Like, I don't think books are often undeservedly remembered. In fact, I think that many books are undeservedly forgotten. But the thing to understand is that like it may have been a good layer of the ball of paint, but it was still just one layer, and like it's going to get painted over too. And the way that it matters is in the way that it shapes the people who come after, the way that it shapes the people to whom it matters. So like King Lear is an objectively good play now more than ever, since we're living in a real life adaptation of it. But a huge part of what makes King Lear so great is the conversations around it and the responses to it that we've all been having for the last 500 years. That's essential to what makes the play so good. If you take that out of the play, it's just a lot less interesting. And of course it's, much less meaningful. So that is another thing I think about sometimes when I'm signing, because I think about how, like if this signature is small, I might respond by trying to make this one big, and then I might say, well, but that didn't work, so I might change something else. And so over a period of time, everything is changed by something that happened, 15 minutes ago that I have forgotten and everyone else has forgotten, but it still mattered. Okay, they're getting too close to me now. I have to take a break. Ask if you have any questions. This is a good time to ask them. I think I'm going to try to finish this box, I don't know what time it is. Well, I'm actually not going that much slower just because you're here, which is nice. So if you have any questions, leave them in comments, and I will go through and look through some of them. And I don't know, I apologize in advance if I don't answer them, because it's not personal. Yeah, so here are the ones I'll show you the ones that I've signed. I'll put them up on the screen. I've signed these today. That's a good place for those. Keeps me away from my phone, which is good. And these. And these. So, I didn't get it on screen. It's that many. I signed, that's about 2,200, I think. Okay. Well, a lot of questions. Okay, I wasn't ready. Emmy's playing Tetris while watching, which is great. Oh, there's so many questions. Okay. All right. So first off, somebody asked if I can solve the Rubik's Cube. Probably not, but I'll try real quick just because my hand does hurt, and I've been told that this helps. So first you make the yellow daisy. I learned this from Robbie Gonzalez, who has a great tutorial. That's the yellow daisy. And then you got to line up each of the pieces of the daisy to their corresponding edges, like that. And then that one will go here. And now I have the white cross on the bottom, which is great. And then I've just got to do some trigger moves, like hoobity hoobity, hoobity hoobity. I got to do that one. Then I got this blue guy over here, so I got to do that one. Oh, and then this one's just in completely the wrong spot. I got to move that around. Now now I've just created a monster. This is why I'm never going to be a speed cuber. Okay, then you got to look up. So now the bottom side is solved. and the face is solved. But now I've got to figure out the second row, which is a pretty simple series of moves. I mean, it can be a lot more complicated if you're good at solving Rubik's Cubes, but fortunately for me, I'm not. So I can just do it this slow way because I'm not trying to win a race. Then there's this green one, so I got to do this guy, hoobity hoobity, and like that. Now we have, nope, we don't. I spoke too soon. There's this blue one to do. Okay. Now we have the whole second side is solved, right? So you have the first two sides that are solved. That's actually the easy thing. But in positive news, I have this little thing which is helpful for solving. So now I do F, U, F, U, R, whatever. I did it right. That's the important thing. I don't know how I did it right. It wasn't easy, but I did it right. Then I do R, dun, 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 dun. That didn't solve it, so I got to do that again. Dun, dun, dun. And now I have a yellow fish at the top. So I put the yellow fish pointing down, and then I do that algorithm again. And then I have solved the top, which is great, but there's bad news, friends, which is that this is the part I don't know how to do. So I've solved almost everything. And then there's this very complicated algorithm you have to do. And it's something like L prime U, L U, L prime U. R prime U, R U, R prime U, R U2, R prime. Only it's not that because now I've messed it up completely. So the answer to can I solve the Rubik's Cube is not unless I look up that algorithm. I can almost solve the Rubik's Cube. People who can actually solve it will be in comments being like, that's all wrong. And I know. I had it till the end. So this is the end of this box, which is great news. These are the last of the box. So the other question I saw a lot in comments was about why do you lift up the piece of paper? Well, so I'll tell you. So let's imagine a world. The argument is that it's faster if instead of doing this lift, it's faster if you sign and then shoot, right? Or some version of signing and then being able to magically pull the paper this way without taking the extra time to lift. So, but my experience has been that if I take the extra time to lift, that I'm actually saving time for future me, the person who's going to have to organize the pages, by being able to put them in about the right place. And also, it doesn't. So the other thing is that I have to be very, very careful. The nightmare scenario here, friends, like one of the things that literally keeps me up at night is these are thin pieces of paper. It is very easy, especially if you don't grab them where you have one finger on one side of the paper and one finger on the other side of the paper. It is very easy to grab two sheets at once, or when you're like pushing off this way to just grab two sheets. In fact, I just did that, and I wasn't doing it as an example. I was doing it because it's so easy. This is a nightmare scenario because when you say, I am signing every copy of the first printing of the Anthropocene Reviewed book, but 1 out of every 100 times you grab two pages and you only sign one of them and you put both of those 2 pages down, you are in fact only signing, I don't know, like 99.5% of the copies. And for those people who get those copies with empty sheets, they are going to be, well, I mean, right, there's a pretty good chance that they won't notice or care, right? Because like there's a pretty good chance that they didn't expect to be getting an autographed book today. They just went to get the book. But they might care. And I don't know. I don't know why that causes me so much anxiety, but it does. It causes me a lot of anxiety to imagine that because of a failure in my system of how I sign these sheets, how I organize them, and how I send them to the printer in Pennsylvania, if my system fails, then I'm going to feel just really responsible. Because even like with The Fault in Our Stars, they were back then. Now, some people would say that I have sort of introduced a scourge into publishing, and I don't totally disagree with them. But like, it was after Will Grayson, after I signed those like 2,000 sheets for the book that I co-wrote with my friend David, I asked my publisher and editor, Julie Strauss Gable, can I sign the first printing of my next book? And she said, no, it's very complicated. We never know how many copies they're going to print. They keep printing them until the very end. There were all these things. And I was like, well, none of that. I was like, I feel like we can work around all of that. I'll just sign as many as I need to. And she was like, but it could be like 20 or 30,000. And I was like, that's fine. I can totally do that. But then it became much more than 30,000 because, I don't know why. I don't really know why The Fault in Our Stars happened. But at any rate, it did happen. And it was sort of happening even before the book was published, because like I read the first couple chapters on Vlogbrothers, as I had for all of my first two books were published before YouTube existed, but or at least before I knew about YouTube. But from the time I wrote Paper Towns, I would always read the first chapter or two of my books in a Vlogbrothers video. And like I did that for Paper Towns, and people were like, that seems nice. And I did it for Turtles All the Way Down, and people were like, that seems nice. And I did it for Will Grayson, and people were like, that seems nice. And then I did it for The Fault in Our Stars, and people were like, they just responded to it, it just in a completely different way. And indeed, like that book has had a completely different life from any of my other books. But so anyway, I did it. I signed the whole first printing, except that I didn't understand the way that international printing and shipping happened. It had been explained properly to me, and I just didn't internalize it because it is so complicated. And I will confess, and I don't know if this is the case for y'all, but like sometimes when people are explaining things to me that are very complicated, and they're things that I'm like not naturally good at understanding. Like for instance, I have a very poor sense of geography and spatial intelligence. Like, like my wife and my children find it very funny that like right now, if I close my eyes, like I really only know that the camera is about there because I have been talking to it. But like if I spun around once, I would have no idea. Not only like where the camera is, I wouldn't know where the TV is. Like now that my eyes have been closed for a while, I don't know where the light is. I think that I'd have to think really hard to figure out what side of the couch I'm on, things like that. Like I have no spatial awareness. And so like when people are explaining geography to me, and they're like, this is in the Western District, 15 miles inland or whatever, I just zone out because I don't even know what those words mean really. And which has been a real problem in a few Vlogbrothers videos where I've said east when I meant west. I say this all the time, like when I think about east, it's stupid, but like when I think about the east coast of Europe, I think about the coast that's closest to me because I'm close to the east coast of the United States. And I think that, like Spain is on the eastern coast of Europe, or Europe doesn't exist. So Spain is on the eastern coast of Eurasia. And I understand logically that it's not. I can look at a map and figure that out. But like when I close my eyes and think about it, it seems to me like Spain is in the east. because it is to the east of me. Now, as my wife has pointed out many times, it is also to the west of me. and I'm just not able. Yeah, anyway, I don't have a good sense of that stuff. So when the international shipping stuff was being explained to me about all these, like, the mechanics of shipping books that are ordered internationally, they're printed in different places a lot of times. In some cases, they are like literally printed in different editions with different ISBN numbers, and all kinds of things can be different. And because of that, it is not. So anyway, the long and short of it is that when The Fault in Our Stars came out, all the first printing was signed and everybody was happy and got their signed books, except for a bunch of people who lived in Europe or Asia or Africa or Australia who had ordered what they thought and what I thought were going to be signed books and who didn't get signed books. And I just felt awful. I still feel awful about this. But I especially like right when it happened, like the day the book came out, I wanted to be excited about the book coming out, but I was mostly just really scared because it just felt like it was going to be very different from my previous books. And that was wonderful in a lot of ways, but also, if I'm being candid, it was really scary. And then there's this big problem with all these wonderfully nice people who had all this faith in me and pre-signed, and pre-ordered my book that they couldn't even know if it was good, and they didn't get a signed copy. So what I ended up doing, and I hope that this solved the problem for most of the people, I ended up sending like signed book plates. But anyway, I still feel really bad about it. So that may be part of why I try really, really hard to make sure there's no unsigned sheets, is because I don't want to introduce any problems into the pipeline. It already requires like an amazing amount of organization and everything from the very, very kind people at Penguin, Random Houses, warehouses, and printing divisions to make this work in the first place. So I want to make sure that insofar as possible, I do my part on that front. There were also questions about how you start out as a writer. I think the specific question was about starting out as a poet, which I know literally nothing about. I just don't know anything about it. With, the recommendation that I try to make with writing is, one, to read a lot of the story. And I guess this is true for poetry too. Like, don't just submit to journals, read the journals you're submitting to. Like, think about when you're working on a book or whatever, like, I think it's very helpful to know what else is being done in the space that you find interesting. Like, I still find it very helpful to read young adult fiction, even though I'm not a teenager, because I'm still interested in writing YA fiction, and I did that for like 15 years, and the whole time I was reading YA fiction to try to learn, from my peers and be inspired by them. So I think that's important. I also think it's important to have beta readers or mentors, if you can, people who you trust, who will read your work and encourage what's good about it and challenge you on what might not be working. That can be really hard and really painful. And that never, for me at least, like that pain and that anxiety never goes away. Like, it's still hard to hear negative stuff about my books, both before and after they're finished. But it's so helpful because, or at least, it's not all helpful. The stuff that's in good faith, that's carefully argued, and that comes from a place of compassion, not wanting to prove a point, is helpful, really helpful, and has changed my writing dramatically, I think, over the last 20 years. Like, when I first wrote Looking for Alaska, or wrote the book that became Looking for Alaska, back in 2003, I was almost I was young. Or at least, I guess it wasn't 2003, it was 2001. So I was 23. And I had a lot of learning to do about what how language works, like how written language works in the minds of other people. But I also had a ton of learning to do about like what the point was, like what the point of writing was. I think in the process of revising Looking for Alaska, first with my mentor, Eileen Cooper, and then with my editor, Julie Strauss-Gable, in that process, I had to start thinking about stories differently. I had to start thinking of stories not as primarily something that existed to serve me or to serve my my personal interests or my ambitions, but instead to think of stories as a way of trying to make a gift for someone, as a way of trying to share something, and I had to make it oriented, or that pretends that I've been a success at this, and I don't know that that's true, but I at least had to like make the effort to make it not about me and to make it about the reader and what they might learn and feel and experience and take away from that reading experience. And that led to a huge shift in Looking for Alaska. Like, it went from being a book that was, like all the things that people like about, I haven't read Looking for Alaska in 15 years, or 16 years, so I have no idea if it's good or not, but I do know like what people say they like in it. And from like the use of the last words of famous people to the structure of the book itself, like all of that came out in revision. And all of it really was born from a feeling that the book needed to not be about or primarily for me. Now, lots of other people feel differently about fiction and books in general, and that's okay. I might be wrong. God, I've been wrong so many times in my life, that like I used to have all these like very strongly held opinions about writing, all of which I disagree with now. And I'm sure that in time I will disagree with the opinions I currently have. And yeah, so the other thing is don't take anybody's advice too seriously. They don't know what they're doing either. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, I know what I'm doing. In fact, one of the main things that I enjoy about signing my name over and over again is it's one of the very few times when I know exactly what I'm doing. Like, I'm signing my name over and over again. But I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to anything else. So, yeah, the main thing is that I wish you luck, and I wish you perseverance, and that you'll continue to try to write and get better at it. And that's also, I really don't want it to sound like I'm saying that writing can't or shouldn't be a form of self-expression, because of course it should. But when you're writing fiction, for me at least, like I'm never writing about myself. Like Turtles All the Way Down is about a kid with OCD, and I have severe OCD just like she does, and I can, there's definitely things that I understand very well about her experience, and that I feel like I can write from the inside on. But it's not about me. And even when I'm writing about OCD, it's not about me. I do think that I've found it helpful to write that story, but not because like it, revealed some truth to me about my mental illness. I think the thing that was helpful to me about writing that story was that when I was writing it, precisely because I wasn't writing about myself, I could look at this kid differently than I looked at myself. Aza and I are very different, and there are big ways that I, like my worldview like one of the hallmarks of fiction is that your worldview doesn't align with the characters, at least when the characters begin the book, because then they, hopefully make a journey toward something. But there's lots of ways in which Aza and I are very different. But when I was writing that story, was really the first time I remember like when I would be writing it, and especially when I was revising it, and I would just get so emotional thinking about this kid and feeling really sorry for her, and feeling a lot of compassion for her in a way that I had struggled to feel compassion for myself. When I thought about my own relationship with OCD, I was much more judgmental and angry, and saw myself as possessing a weakness that I couldn't, that I was failing to think my way out of because of some, insufficiency in my character. And when writing Turtles All the Way Down, because I was forced to get outside of myself and think about, related issues from the perspective of someone else, like I started to think about it very differently. And, it was clear to me that she was in a lot of pain and also deserving of love. And that's what was helpful for me about it, not the processing, not the direct processing through journaling. Like for me, and again, this is just for me, I know lots of people feel differently. They're probably right. I don't know what I'm doing. But for me, writing fiction is just fundamentally different from journaling, because when I'm journaling, on some level, I'm always writing about myself. And when I'm writing fiction, on some level, I'm never writing about myself, or never entirely anyway. And for me, this book, which is the first time I've tried to write nonfiction, like I guess every Vlogbrothers video I've ever written is an act of nonfiction writing, sort of. But this is the first time I've tried to write essays, I guess, in a more formal way. And it's interesting because it's a memoir, and it is like a memoir, and the stories I tell about myself are, true, but of course they're also selected. And in that process, I've found that, even though I'm writing more directly about my worldview, and, there will be less one thing that's one thing that bugs me about internet discourse these days is when subreddits or Twitter or whatever will screenshot a passage from a book. This doesn't happen with my work very often, but I do see it a lot with other people's work, where people will screenshot an image and say can you believe how stupid this author is, when it's quite clear to me that the author knows something that the character doesn't, right? Which is often the case with fiction. But we've in some ways we've done this to ourselves, and I've especially done it to myself by having a very public life. And then there's something to me really problematic about when you have a public life and then you're oh, but don't read me into the novel. That's asking. I think that might be asking a bit much. I think that may be ultimately unfair to readers. But at any rate, when I've written fiction, I'm never writing about myself, and I often disagree with the characters, and you have to disagree with them at certain points in their character arc, because they've got to go from something they don't know to something that they do know, or from something they think one way about to something they think differently about. But when writing about myself for the first time in any kind of formal way, it's been interesting to see the ways that I'm I'm still trying to do that. I'm still trying to even though it's about me in a way that none of my writing before has been, I'm trying to make it about I'm still trying to think of it as a gift, trying to think of it as as something that I'm making for other people, not primarily, or at least not exclusively for my benefit. So I don't know to what extent I've succeeded with that. But that's always been the idea of the podcast, is how do you write about yourself? This is true with all of my favorite nonfiction. Like this book that we just read for Weiss Library, Ulysses on Immunity, is a great example of a book that's intensely personal, but also very, very much and very obviously written as a gift. And that's just my favorite kind of writing. So these are getting bad. I don't know if the paper is getting low or what, but I'm gonna try to rearrange something. That one was okay, but I'm not happy with this at all. But hopefully a spiral will make it better. Okay. I mean, look, it's just down to this. This is maybe 250 sheets. So it's pretty good progress. Maybe I should live stream the whole dang thing. No, I don't want to do that though, because I like to watch bad TV and listen to, podcasts. I guess, but yeah, it's also like you don't want to go into that point where you're live streaming your whole life. That's down that path lies trouble. Okay. There we go. We're almost there. I think that this pen is going to get us to the end. Okay. Yeah, I did go very fast through that. I don't know why. Now everything speeds up so much now that I'm looking. Okay. And poor Untapped Inkwell is having to say caps in moderation again. Okay. I think I'm just gonna. That's a good question about paper cuts. Whoa! Somebody super chatted $100. Oh, I mean, I will give that money away to battle maternal mortality, but that was very generous and completely unnecessary. Okay. All right. Yeah, let's keep talking about what's up with the jacket. Sure, that's great. I'm gonna go sign. I'm just gonna sign. Olivia has an interesting question about movie stuff. Yeah, so I wear the jacket inside because it's quite chilly in here, and also like I find it weird that all of us don't wear jackets inside all the time, because then we would use like much less energy to heat our houses, and the only way in which we are inconvenienced is by wearing a jacket, which is kind of pleasant. It's kind of like having a little blanket with you all the time. So to me, it is not like a sacrifice. It's just sort of a nice, see, I almost did it. I almost just did it because I wasn't careful. I wasn't being careful. I almost just put an unsigned copy in the signed copy pile, which would have meant that some nice person, probably nice person, would have gotten an unsigned book, and now I have to recommit myself to checking to make sure that each page is only a page. So the other question was about whether this experience of book to movie adaptations has affected my writing. I mean, it's definitely affected my writing in the sense that it's slowed down. Looking for Alaska came out in 2005, and Abundance of Catherines came out in 2006. Paper Towns came out in 2008. Will Grayson in 2010. The Fault in Our Stars in 2012. And Turtles All the Way Down in 2017. I don't know when my next novel will be published. If indeed, I don't know that I'll ever write another novel or publish another novel. I hope I do. I hope I will, but I don't know. So there were there are a lot of different reasons for that. Some is that the movie stuff in general was time consuming, especially the promotion part, and not just time consuming, but also pretty intense. And so it made me a lot more self-conscious about my writing, a lot more like aware of it, a little bit more of a feeling that people were looking over my shoulder. It just changed the way that it. So just in a practical way, it was intense and freaked me out, and to be honest, made it difficult to write for a while. But that wasn't happening in isolation, because at the same time, like Crash Course launched on the day The Fault in Our Stars came out. So there was also this big change in the other part of my professional life, where I went from being somebody who makes videos alone in a basement to working with a team of people on a project I was really, really passionate about, which was getting, free, high quality educational video to anyone with an internet connection. And so Crash Course took up a ton of time, but I also feel like that might have been the most important, time thing I could have done in my professional life. And so I certainly don't regret like that time, even though it did take a lot of time away from writing and all that. So there's just the practical side of it. As far as the did it inform the way I think about storytelling? I have always been a very kind of non-visual writer, I think. I don't really think visually, as evidenced by my inability to know that Spain is in Western Europe, even after all this practice. Is that right? Yeah. I think it is. I'm not totally sure. Anyway, what has always interested me about writing, and the reason I've always been drawn to writing instead of to video games or movies or TV shows or whatever, is words themselves and language and written language itself, and all the what feels to me like little secrets that are contained within words and within the symbols of language itself. Like, we often talk about figurative language as in opposition to, or as like the opposite of, concrete language, which sort of misses to me the real astonishment, which is that all language is figurative, because it's just a bunch of scratches on a page that different human brains have to translate into ideas that will be done in highly specific context dependent ways, right? Like, the different people reading the same text will understand it differently, view it differently, feel differently about it, and so on. Like, it's an inherently metaphoric enterprise. This is what's always kind of bothered me as a religious person, when people talk about reading a sacred text literally. Like, you can't read, to me anyway, you can't read like any text literally. Like, it's an inherently metaphoric enterprise. It's just how conscious you are of that metaphorization and what you conclude from it and stuff. So, and there are lots of examples of this in my work. Like, like in Abundance of Catherine's, like a third of the book takes place in what's called, or what in the book is called cave darkness, where there's like absolutely literally no light. And so there's literally nothing that you can see. You can't see your nose on the end of your face. You can't see your hand in front of your face. And, I wrote that because I wanted to have this moment where these characters weren't, even conscious of, or weren't even able to be aware of what each other looked like, or what, different, any of the sort of like cues that we all get, or that many of us get from looking at people, cues about their feelings and so on. And because this kid, Colin, is not great at reading those visual cues of from other people, from their facial expressions and stuff, I wanted to like give him a moment in cave darkness so that this other kid could imagine a little better of what it's like to be him. And so I always end up writing in places that are, or writing about places that are almost like devisualized, or like are made out of language in one way or another, at least like in my mind. So it didn't really change that, because it couldn't change that, because my visual imagination is so incredibly bad. It's so poor, it's so limited, that like I still can't like think of a movie plot and imagine, the like really nice moments in movies where something visual comes back at the end and you're like, oh, that's so surprisingly moving because this visual totem that has been carried through the whole movie has paid off in this surprising way. I can't do that stuff. Like, I tried to do it a little bit with this painting in Turtles All the Way Down, and maybe like the reemergence of the Raymond Pettibon spiral painting at the end of Turtles All the Way Down was like maybe a response to something I learned from watching people make movies. But mostly what I learned watching people make movies is, one, that it's hard, and two, that it is its own very real and very valuable artistic enterprise, and three, that I am not good at it. So it was more like getting to visit a really fascinating world that isn't yours. And when you visit a really fascinating world that isn't yours, like in some ways there's less stress, because you're not sitting there thinking like, oh, how do I like turn what I'm learning into lessons that I can then use to direct my own movies or to write my own screenplays or whatever. And I never thought any of that, because I knew full dang well that I was never going to write a screenplay or direct a movie. So for me, a big part of what made the movie adaptation process fun was precisely that it wasn't going to be my job or a major part of my my professional life. So, and I don't know that those experiences are over. I think that there's still a chance that they might make a Turtles All the Way Down movie, and I would be really happy if they did, because not even because I mean I would love for more people to interact with the story, and it's always really wonderful when smart people take your work and make something new from it. That's just a really exciting feeling. Like, that's true for fan art or fan fiction as much as it's true for movie adaptations for me. Like, it's just so thrilling, and it's such an honor. So there's that, but there's also just like, I like working with those people. I've known the people who would be working on it for over 10 years in a lot of cases, and they're just it's really fun. It's really fun, open, collaborative environment. In the same way that I like working with the people who make Crash Course, and that's a huge part of what makes. I think it's a big part of what makes Crash Course fun, but also it's a big part of what makes it like fulfilling. Is life. So much of life is less about what you do than it is about who you do it with, and yeah. So that's what I really took away from the process, was that were the personal relationships. That's, to be honest, like, it was really cool to have all that weird stuff happen and to like be invited to certain nice parties. But when I think back on it and I think about the way that it impacts my present life, I mostly think about like what I've learned from my amazing friendship with Nat Wolff, and what I've learned from my friendship with Isaac Klausner, the producer of those movies, and what I've learned from Stephanie Savage and Josh Schwartz and Charlie Plummer and Christine Froseth and Shay. And so that's what I think about, to be honest. I have finished that went very quick. I think it might have gone faster with y'all here than with you not here, which seems impossible. Now I have like, what time is it? Oh, I actually didn't go that quick. It's just that I got in the zone mentally, and so more time passed. I was going to be like, now I have 20 minutes to eat lunch and calm down, but I don't. I have to go because I have to do a call. It's great to talk with you. Thank you for letting me sign my name so many times, and maybe we'll try to do this again. But yeah, thanks for being here, and I hope you enjoy the Anthropocene reviewed book if you pre-order it, but don't feel obligated to. Okay, bye.